is a 2020 Democratic presidential candidate and author of The War on Normal People, The Truth About America's Disappearing Jobs and Why Universal Basic Income is Our Future. That's all the time we have, ladies and gentlemen.
Let me introduce to you the next president of the United States, Andrew Yang!
Hello, I'm Andrew Yang, and I'm running for president as a Democrat in 2020.
This isn't a WWE event. This is a political rally for Andrew Yang, complete with pyrotechnics and a celebration of math and the song Return of the Mac.
You got some people here tonight who are excited that you're here, Mr. Yang. What do you call your followers?
Well, the YangGang's out here in full force. Thank you all.
YangGang?
As far as the eye can see, you don't look like the internet to me. You know what you look like? You look like human fucking beings!
Mr. Yang, it's an interview.
Of his party's presidential contestants, he's the cheerful doomsayer.
Seen here wearing a hat labeled with the thing that will cost him the election.
There was only one lapel pin tonight that said math.
In Andrew Yang's world, math stands for Make America Think Harder.
All these numbers and all this nerd shit. Listen, there's only one thing that wins elections in America, okay? That's fear and hate.
That's two things.
Okay, again, with the numbers.
23 people are running. Why you?
You are getting f***ed. And so if you want to help me un you, then vote me into office.
What's the quickest version of who is Andrew Yang?
Well, I'm not a career politician. I'm an entrepreneur and problem solver. And I'm running for president to solve the problems that got Donald Trump into the White House in 2016. He's our president because we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs. We're in the midst of the greatest economic transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the fourth industrial revolution.
When's the last time you heard a politician say fourth industrial revolution, Los Angeles? Just now, that's right. And I'm barely a politician. He just said getting there. That's the meanest things anyone said to me all day.
So you're a businessman from New York, like the President Trump.
No, please don't.
We already have a business dude in the White House.
Please don't compare me to that guy.
I'm just saying.
Entrepreneurs regard Trump as a marketing charlatan and a fraud, and not a genuine builder.
You said you are the complete opposite of Donald Trump, and the reason was
because listen to the reason why. Because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math.
I actually think the opposite of Trump would be a black guy who is a good president. There you go. Didn't know where you guys were going to land on that one.
To me, the government's responsibility is to solve the biggest problems and address the biggest needs that don't have any market incentive attached to them.
We have to acknowledge the depth and severity of the problems, but we have to have a new set of solutions. What were Donald Trump's solutions? We're going to build a wall. We're going to turn the clock backwards. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society for the true challenges of the 21st century. We have to evolve in the way we think about work and value in our own place, in our own country.
So I'm running for president to help advance meaningful solutions, including $1,000 a month for every American adult starting at age 18.
Now, what is...
Can I just say, of all the candidates I've seen on the trail, you seem to be having the most fun. Are you?
Oh, it's a very low bar you set, Trevor.
I believe this is all just in the last week or two.
Let's see it.
You are. You're out there. You've got cool music. You're rapping at campaign events. It feels like Andrew Yang. You're just you're having a good time whilst you're putting out your policy proposals.
I want to see Joe Biden try that.
I crowd surfed a lot as a kid. I went to the first 3 Lollapaloozas and stuff like that. Some people crowd surfed at the rally last night in LA.
You're having a good time out there.
Yes. It's time to grill. So here's the joke I used to tell. I went to law school. I was an unhappy lawyer for 5 months. You say to your parents, hey, I'm going to go to law school. They're going to say, that's great. And the government will give you a $100,000 loan. And then if you say to your parents, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur, your parents will think that's stupid and no one's going to give you a $100,000 loan. So we have this huge oversupply of indebted law school graduates and a huge undersupply of entrepreneurs. So I started this organization, Venture for America, to try and fix that.
People think about Andrew Yang as a tech entrepreneur, and that's what he's called. But he's not.
Yeah.
He made money doing test prep.
Yang grew up in Schenectady, New York. His first big success was running a college test prep company. Then he founded Venture for America.
Venture for America is a 2-year fellowship program for top college graduates who want to learn how to build businesses and create jobs.
You guys are, in fact, champions of change. You're making a big difference in your communities.
He was named a presidential ambassador of entrepreneurship by the Obama administration and a champion of change.
And so imagine being this guy getting medals and awards for helping create jobs around the country, and then realizing that automation's coming like a tidal wave and that your efforts that you're getting applauded for are really not going to do the trick.
I spent 7 years helping create thousands of jobs in cities around the country, and I came face to face with the aftermath of the automation of the manufacturing jobs. Detroit was a city with a peak population of 1.7 million. Now it is down to 680,000. And when you go to Detroit, you can see a thriving neighborhood in one direction. Then you just turn 90 degrees and you see desolation and despair as far as the eye can see. Yeah. Confirmed, he said.
Then I was grappling with it, and I'm a parent like you are. And I looked at my kids and I was like, am I really going to bring them up in this shit show? Like, is this really the plan?
Our kids are not all right. They are not all right because we have left them a future far darker than the lives that we have led as their parents.
Why run for president as your first foray into politics?
Well, it wasn't my first choice, honestly.
Okay.
Now, my first move was not to run for president of the United States because I am not insane. I went to people in Washington, D.C. I was like, hey, guys, what are we going to do? The answers I got were literally, number one, we cannot talk about that. Number two, we should study that.
We cannot talk about that.
That's verbatim.
Really?
Yeah.
And number three, we have to educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. Only a YangGang rally would boo that shit. But you're totally right to boo it because it's total nonsense. You all know how effective government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers in the Midwest? 0 to 15%. That's right, YangGang. That's a fail. That's a fail by any curve. Well, the fail chant, that's a new one. My parents are somewhere smiling. One of them gave me some guidance that led me here to you all tonight. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one in Washington, D.C. will touch this because fundamentally this is not a town of leaders, this is a town of followers. In order for us to do anything about it, you're going to have to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads here in D.C. And I said, challenge accepted, Los Angeles! So that is why I'm here with you tonight, running for president, and I was 4th in the country in a recent national poll. And you know why I was 4th. It's because I'm talking sense, I'm describing the real problems, and I have real solutions that would actually improve our lives and make our lives better.
When I told my wife I was running for president, you know the first question she asked me?
Who are you?
You're right that most people have never heard of Andrew Yang, and I'm already polling at 1%, enough for me to make the debates.
First-time politician, Yang is doing surprisingly well.
Nationally, you're polling at about 2%.
A little higher than that.
Little higher than that.
Come on.
John and Hethel, feel free to follow up on this. Are you running to win? And do you think you can win?
Oh, I 100% can win.
Yeah?
The prediction markets have me as the 3rd most likely to be the nominee. So Nate Silver took a look at the numbers. Andrew Yang has raised over $3 million in increments of $20 each. Andrew Yang is polling at 3% nationwide, and Andrew Yang's name recognition is lower than every other candidate's. Based upon those 3 numbers, our projections cannot discount the possibility that as more Americans find out about Andrew Yang, he grows and grows and grows and wins the whole thing.
Okay, so you're Asian, you're running for president. What else is there to know?
My platform. We talk as if Donald Trump is the cause of all of our problems. He is not. He is a symptom, and we need to cure the disease.
If you watch cable news, why would you think Donald Trump's our president today? I know some of you are like, cable news, I haven't watched that shit in years. Russia, racism, Facebook, the FBI, Hillary Clinton, emails. And I call bullshit. That's right, I did some fucking math. There's a straight line up between the adoption of industrial automation in a voting area and the movement towards Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa. And we automated away 4 million jobs, mainly in those states. That is why Donald Trump is our president today.
Oh my God, artificial intelligence, robots, that's your thing?
Yes. This is no longer speculative. This is not down the road. We're in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution already. They see what's happening around them. Their main street stores are closing. They see a self-serve kiosk in every McDonald's, every grocery store, every CVS. And if you go to a factory, you'll see it's just giant robot arms as far as the eye can see. So it's not just that you have artificial intelligence on the horizon. It's that we've been eating away at the most common jobs in the U.S. economy for almost 20 years now.
I want to understand the data on this.
Senator, thank you very much.
I want to make sure we're responding to make this work.
Your time is up. I want to get...
Economists project 1/3 of American workers will lose their jobs to automation and technology in the next 12 years. The Obama White House, MIT, McKinsey, Bain all project that between 20 and 30% of American jobs are going to be lost to automation over the next 10 to 20 years. The Obama White House, literally like their last day in office, they issued a report saying, hey guys, we're going to automate away all the jobs and then, turn the lights off.
30% of America's stores and malls close, and the most common job in much of the country is working as a retail clerk or cashier. The average retail worker in the United States is a 39-year-old woman making between $9 and $11 an hour. What is she going to do when her store closes? Fred says she's going to cry. There will be tears shed.
And now what we did to those jobs, we are doing to the retail jobs, the call center jobs, the fast food jobs.
McDonald's is rolling out self-serve kiosks in every location in the United States by 2021.
A recent automated medical procedure where they did surgery on a grape.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that. And China's already had just a complete automated dental implantation. It's the lawyers. I did that job long enough to know that you can automate a lot of that job. Oh, you laugh. AI can edit contracts faster, more efficiently, more inexpensively than the best human lawyer at this point. Radiology and looking at tumors on a film. Because it turns out that AI can see shades of gray that a human eye cannot.
When you call a big company, you get the customer service line. What do, Los Angeles? You dial 000, say human, human, human until you get someone on the line. Am I right?
In a few years, it's going to be an AI that sounds like this. Hey, how's it going, Trevor? What can I do for you?
That's creepy.
It's creepy.
It's going to be efficient, delightful, a little bit sexy, apparently.
I have friends who right now are working on AI that's going to automate basic coding. So if you think about coding as like, oh, you'll always have a job with like coding, it's like actually that stuff's kind of automatable.
Is artificial intelligence, is there any chance, and I'm just asking for a friend, that they would do talk shows too? Are there talk show hosts in danger of losing their jobs?
You won't believe this, but they actually have a virtual talk show host, but they're primarily reading the news, not comedy.
Okay. That's worrisome.
How many of you all know a truck driver?
I know Fred.
They know Fred.
Hello, this is Fred.
For those who don't know, Fred's a truck driver who let me ride in his truck, and now he has my face on his truck. And something like, 50 feet long and 30 feet high, and it's like, whoa. There are 3.5 million truckers in this country, and my friends right here in California are working on trucks that can drive themselves. Why do so many of my friends care about self-driving trucks? For the most American of reasons, the money.
Savings from automating truck driving are estimated to be $168 billion per year.
They tell me they're 98% of the way there. What is that going to mean for the 3.5 million truckers in this country and the 7 million Americans who work at truck stops, hotels, diners, and retail establishments that need the truckers to get out and have a meal? A year and a half ago, I said, hey, what do you think about robot trucks? They were like, impossible, never going to happen. You talk to them today and be like, hey, what do you think about robot trucks? They're like, they got to make those illegal.
Many of the truckers actually took out massive loans to lease their cars, their trucks. So imagine if you owed $80,000 on a truck, and then you saw the robot truck hit the highway that never needs to stop. He's saying smash your truck into that truck. There's going to be a lot of passion a lot of resistance to this. It's going to be much more likely that they say you need to make these robot trucks illegal, or they're just going to park their trucks across the highway, get their guns out, because a lot of these guys are ex-military. And if you look at the Industrial Revolution, which people cite as the precursor to what we're going through, there were mass riots. Labor Day is a holiday today because of those riots. And we're going to displace jobs at 3 to 4 times the rate of that industrial revolution. So even based on our own history, you would expect massive social convulsions, including potentially violence. So then if you say, hey, I'm going to retrain 500,000 truck drivers, for what? If you said, I'm here to retrain you, they'd be more likely to punch you in the face than sign up. Get like 8 punches for every 2 signatures. If you've been to a truck stop lately, you know what I'm talking about. People walk around and be like, hey, I'm the government retrainers. The success rates were 0 to 15%. Half of the manufacturing workers that lost their jobs in the Midwest never worked again. When a politician talks about education and retraining, it's a lazy, irresponsible fantasy that they are selling.
Yeah, this is such a bleak forecast.
I'm like hanging out with the tech wizards of Silicon Valley, and I'm like, hey, you know, we're going to automate these jobs, man. And they're like, oh yeah, we're going to automate these jobs. You know, like it's, you know, so it's not a mystery, and they're not bad people. It's like, hey, it's my job to like make stuff work better.
That sounds evil to me.
Well, they're not doing it deliberately. It's just like a repercussion of their work.
Got it. Okay.
And then if you say to them, would you like to give up a slice so that America actually is in position to share and benefit? You know what they say to me? They say, no one's ever asked me that before. So what we have to do is we have to give them, really, in this case, actually, we're not going to give them a choice. We're just going to make it happen.
Right.
But half of them are on board with it. I've been endorsed by Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey and Sam Altman and some of the biggest leaders in technology today, in large part because they don't think that society where people feel like they're being left behind is good for innovation.
Stop building the robots. Hit the off switch.
Or we just start dispensing the bounty as fast as possible.
You make it in America, we should be benefiting from that. Andrew Yang opened my eyes to this idea that he has.
In the face of these changes, we need to build a new kind of economy, one that puts people first. That is where my Freedom Dividend comes in.
No, he did not bring $1,000 for every family.
You don't know that, Craig. You don't know that.
UBI, which sounds like a bowel disease.
I didn't name it. It's one reason why we've rebranded it the Freedom Dividend.
The Freedom Dividend is a great name, too. It's like the Patriot Act. Like, it gets people excited. Freedom. We're all about freedom.
Who could be against freedom? My flagship proposal is a Freedom Dividend of $1,000 a month for every American adult starting at age 18.
You all remember the first time you heard about me in the campaign, how there's an Asian man running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. You remember that, Los Angeles?
And they're like, wow, $1,000 a month sounds too good to be true. That would be a real game changer.
The first time you heard it, you were like, ha, that's a gimmick. That'll never happen. But if you dig into it, you will find this is not an Andrew Yang idea. This is a Thomas Paine idea.
It's a deeply American idea where Thomas Paine was for it at the founding of the country.
This is a Martin Luther King idea.
Martin Luther King fought for it. And it is what he was fighting for every day up to the day he was assassinated in 1968.
Now, one of the answers, it seems to me, is a guaranteed annual income.
Milton Friedman, the godfather of conservative economists, was for it.
This is an Elon Musk idea.
I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income.
So did Richard Nixon for a time.
Yeah, Richard Nixon. And it even passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971. So this is not as radical as you might think. And 11 years later, one state passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked.
It's been in effect in one state for the last 40 years. And what state is that, Los Angeles? And how does Alaska pay for it? And what is the oil of the 21st century? Marijuana, that's right, Los Angeles. It's not marijuana, you were right. Technology, software, AI, big data, self-driving cars and trucks.
How does the Freedom Dividend work?
So the Freedom Dividend would be universal and opt-in. I've been giving $1,000 a month to families around the country for a number of months now. And one of them is here tonight, Kyle Christensen, who lives in Iowa Falls. Thank you, Kyle. Look at that. I thought you were up there, Kyle. I'm glad you're at the fancy table.
So Kyle lives in Iowa Falls with his mom who's recovering from cancer. He said that after he'd taken care of some bills, he bought a guitar and was playing shows for the first time in years.
For him, it was a guitar. For Jody Fassy in New Hampshire, it was car repairs.
For Mallory in Florida, it was going back to school at the age of 68. This is what the Freedom Dividend would mean for us in real life.
What would you spend it on? Beer. I heard beer. We are at a steak fry. Rent, college, philanthropy. I like that person. Let's give that person some money. Sports activities, I like it. That's what I'm talking about.
We're gonna spend it on the things that make our lives better. Daycare, car repairs we've been putting off, school loans, Little League sign-ups, making art. How much of it would stay where you live and work and go to school? Most of it. Not all of it. You would upgrade the Netflix. You'd get your own Netflix password, really.
It's enough to be a game changer. Would make us stronger, healthier, less stressed out, mentally healthier. Would reduce domestic violence, reduce hospital visits.
I mean, how's that going to improve their health?
How will it not improve their health? Dr. Oz. And it would mean healthier food. It would mean lower stress levels. It would mean more time spent with your kids. Studies have shown that your kids are healthier, better nourished, more likely to graduate from high school and get further education, and your worker productivity goes up. It does create opportunities, including in the arts, but also in entrepreneurship. And as you know, I'm a serial entrepreneur. We need to have more Americans being put in position to do the kind of work that they actually want to do. How many Americans would prefer to do something creative or artistic or coaching in their community or journalism or something that right now the market won't support? What I say to CEOs, and I've spoken to groups of dozens of CEOs, what's really bad for your business is when people don't have money to spend. Our economy functions much better when we have money to spend, where we can participate in the market, where businesses are responsive to us, we'll start more businesses, we'll be able to change jobs more easily.
Gotta pay taxes on $1,000?
No, you don't.
How did you come up with $1,000?
It was proposed by a guy named Andy Stern and then studied by the Roosevelt Institute. But it does make sense on many levels because $12,000 a year is right below the U.S. poverty line. So it moves you up to that level.
The Freedom Dividend actually was originated by a guy named Andy Stern, who used to run the biggest labor union in the country. And what he said was like, this is going to make us more exploitation proof.
If you give people $1,000 a month cash, they may not make the right decisions.
When Verizon, Coke, Microsoft, all those companies declare dividends, everyone's like, nice work. And you know what no one ever asks? What are the shareholders going to do with the money?
My initial knee-jerk reaction was, get the fuck out of here. Like, universal basic income, just going to give people money, they're just going to be lazy, nothing's ever going to get done. That's a terrible idea.
You can't just give people free money. That's the only reason people work. If I was getting paid without having to work, 你以为我会在这边跟这些白人做工？
我不同意. You can't quit your job on $12,000.
What do you say to people who say people don't just want a check, they want a job?
I'm going to ask the people here in the studio audience, how many of you think that if you were getting $1,000 a month, you would work harder? Oh, look at that. Virtually everyone. How many of you think that you would just hit the sofa and never get up?
They're like, we're on television, we can't raise our hand.
They have found, for instance, in some Scandinavian countries, that then people don't work enough or they don't want to work, they lose ambition. There's a negative effect to that.
Well, when I've looked at all of the studies as to what happened when people got money, only two groups worked less. New mothers who spend more time with their children, and teenagers who spend more time in school and graduate at higher levels. I don't think anyone here has a problem with either of those things. No one's going to quit their job on $1,000 a month unless they're in a truly abusive or exploitative situation, at which point they probably should be able to leave. How many of you would agree with this statement? Americans have gotten less reasonable, less rational, less optimistic, and more subject to bad ideas in the last 20 years. Majority of hands are up. There have been studies as to what happens to your mind when you can't pay your bills. It actually constrains your bandwidth to a point that your functional IQ goes down by 13 points. That's like a really huge effect. Yeah. We're actually making our population more subject to bad ideas, nastier, more subject to things like racism and misogyny too, because it turns out what happens with most of us is you need executive functioning to resist like racist and misogynistic impulses. So what we do is we get the boot off their throat. All of a sudden, they'd become much more reasonable, rational. If you say, hey, climate change is real, they'll be like, oh yeah, I really need to worry about that. Because you can't worry about a problem that seems like it's years away if you can't pay next month's rent. And then when you do lose your job, it's not an existential threat. And then you go home to a town, let's say it's a town in Missouri with 10,000 adults, there's another $10 million in discretionary spending in your town. If you have a country where 78% of us are living paycheck to paycheck, you put money into our hands, that legitimately grows the economy every single day.
But does it though? Because one of the
questions...
yeah, it does. Well, fine.
That will cost $3 trillion. Where's this money coming from?
The first thing is it's not actually $3 trillion. We're spending about $1.5 trillion right now on 126 welfare programs and Social Security. We're just going to say you're guaranteed 1,000, and if you're already getting more, then this doesn't touch you. You can keep your current stuff. So the $3 trillion actually shrinks a lot very fast because of the fact that about half of Americans are already getting various income support. Here's the Freedom Dividend. If you opt in, then you're saying I prefer that to other stuff. So the real price tag is closer to about 1.8 trillion. For context, the entire US economy is now 20 trillion and the federal budget's 4 trillion. We all know that right now most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. They're going to spend it. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's going to go right back into the economy. But putting buying power into our hands will build a trickle up economy and allow us to create hundreds of thousands of jobs. And then all of those businesses end up hiring more people, and then we end up getting some of the money back as tax revenues. There was one study that showed that if you were to alleviate extreme poverty in this country, you would increase our GDP by 700 billion. We're going to save 1 to 200 billion on things like incarceration and homelessness services and emergency room healthcare. I was in New Hampshire and a prison guard said to me, this is a prison guard, we should pay people to stay out of jail because we waste so much money when they're in jail. So if you imagine a society where everyone's getting $1,000 a month, it's a great incentive to try and stay out of jail. And it reduces recidivism because when you come out of jail, at least you have, $1,000 a month waiting for you. But if you reduce our incarcerated population by 10 to 20%, I mean, that's billions and billions of dollars. And the way you get the last 800 billion or so is related to what we think is happening with AI and all these advanced technologies.
Do you put a tax on robots? Do you protect the workers? This is an honest proposal. It sounds funny.
Don't laugh.
No,
That's
it sounds
actually a
funny,
very good idea.
How many of you noticed stores closing where you live in Los Angeles? And why are those stores closing? That's right, Amazon's like a giant black hole sucking up $20 billion in business every single year. This is how they suck up money. This is the universal symbol for sucking up money. Apparently, if you do this for a little while, you get $20 billion a year.
How much did Amazon pay in federal taxes last year? Zero. So think about a $1 trillion tech company
Amazon,
paying
those
zero
fuckers,
in
get
taxes. That's right. It's Google, it's Facebook, it's Netflix. Netflix also paid zero in taxes last year. So these are some of the biggest companies in our society.
And I'm going to say that is not their fault, that is our fault. We have to be pretty fucking stupid to let $1 trillion tech company pay nothing in taxes. Am I right, Los Angeles?
We've set up a really easy to game system. Our most powerful CEOs just see government as something to walk around and just avoid. The argument I make to folks is that Jeff Bezos probably owns this building.
He does. Well, he doesn't own this building. In disclosure, he does own the Washington Post. It's a personal property.
Jeff Bezos is worth $120 billion post-divorce. Let's say I ratchet the personal income tax rate all the way up to 80%. How much of that $120 billion are we going to get from Jeff? Next to nothing. Because Jeff is not dumb enough to pay himself $10 billion a year and then let us tax 80% of it. He probably pays himself some nominal rate while the vast majority of his wealth is in Amazon stock. Other countries have looked at this and said it's unacceptable that you have $1 trillion tech company that pays zero in taxes. Every other advanced economy in the world has something called a value-added tax. Canada, Germany, France, the UK, Sweden.
I don't completely understand what a VAT tax is. Can you explain that? Like really dumbed down?
It's a tax on value transfers. One difference between a VAT and a sales tax is it applies to the means of production. We put a mechanism in place where we, the American people, get our fair share, tiny slice of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, every robot truck mile. We need to wise up to the fact that companies like Amazon are very smart and moving their earnings through places like Ireland where the American taxpayer will see none of it, whereas a value-added tax will make it impossible for them to sell to us without paying into our society their fair share. You can't escape it. It's one reason why other countries have put it into place. If you were to adopt a value-added tax at half the European level, you would generate about $800 billion in new revenue per year. The only reason the value-added tax not been on the table in America is because the companies have been lobbying the crap out of it to try and keep it off the table.
Why do you prefer the value-added tax over, say, a wealth tax, something like what Elizabeth Warren's proposed?
And a wealth tax makes a lot of sense in principle. The problem is that it's been tried in Germany, France, Denmark, Sweden, and all those countries ended up repealing it because it had massive implementation problems and did not generate the revenue that they'd projected. Many wealthy Americans do not want everyone in the public to know exactly how much they have. What you'd see is Americans would get divorced from their spouses so they'd get below the income threshold. You'd see people, in some cases, even renouncing their citizenship because you have to ask yourself, if you were worth hundreds of millions of dollars, would you rather pay $10 million a year to be an American, or would you rather go to Canada or some other country and say, hey, guess what? How would you like a really rich person?
You don't support a federal minimum wage.
That's not correct. I do support a higher minimum wage.
But not a federal one.
I support a higher federal minimum wage. I think no one should be working full time in this country and be poor. To me, the issue is that if you just raise the minimum wage, there are going to be some businesses on the margins that have a hard time bearing those costs. If we have a dividend of $1,000 a month, it's an effective raise of $6 an hour. Instead of coming out of small business owners, this actually helps small businesses because we all have more money to spend.
You are able to work, we have a job for you.
Oh my gosh. Where do I start? I am for the spirit of a federal jobs guarantee, but you have to look at how it would actually materialize in practice. What are the jobs? Who manages you? What if you don't like your job? What if you're not good at your job? The fact is, most Americans do not want to work for the federal government. And saying that that is the vision of the economy of the 21st century, to me, is not a vision that most Americans would embrace. Studies have shown that in past programs, people who've been in that sort of government jobs program have been unable to transition to private employment because private employers don't regard that experience as valuable. Now, federal jobs guarantee does nothing for parents, nurturers, and caregivers. And to me, that's some of the most important work that any of us are doing.
How does this not inflate our debt?
You all remember voting for the $4 trillion bailout of Wall Street during the crisis?
No.
No, none of us voted for it. Yet that's what happened, and there was not rampant inflation. If you went into your favorite restaurant after the Freedom Dividends passed, thank you, America, and the prices were 80% higher, it's not like you're cost insensitive. You'd be like, wait. And then it just takes one restaurant that doesn't decide to gouge you for you to go there, and then all the other restaurants like, oh snap, I guess I can't raise my prices by 60%. There are three core sources of inflation in American life. Number one is housing. Number two is education. Number three is healthcare. Just about everything else in the consumer economy staying the same, even getting cheaper or better. No sane landlord would ever jack it up by like 1,000. You would do like anyone else would do, which is you'd be like, well, let's see what else is out there. And this $1,000 a month that we're all getting is portable. It's not contingent upon my living next to where we all work. It actually makes us much more mobile and dynamic and able to make better adjustments. This actually makes it harder to exploit us, not easier.
Homeless people, they get the Freedom Dividend.
Yes, they do.
Why not just set a threshold?
If you look at the Alaskan experience, everyone's getting the oil dividend from the poorest Alaskan to the richest. And because of that, it's universally popular. There's no stigma attached to it. It's not like I'm paying for it, you're getting it. You don't need to monitor people's circumstances. You'd get it too.
They would price you out. Hey, look, trust me, I would not have had you on the show if I was on the outside looking in on the Yang plan.
You too? You need it, I know. No, you don't.
I got my eye on these Tom Ford cufflinks.
And so the joke I tell is that if we get hundreds of millions from Jeff Bezos and then try and send him $1,000 a month to remind him he's an American, that's not something we should be concerned about.
I met Jeff Bezos and I didn't think of just saying, can I have some of your money? We don't think of these things.
Yeah, maybe we should have asked him.
Republicans might just come back and say this is just, another socialist redistribution plan.
Universal basic income is not socialism. It's capitalism where income doesn't start at zero. So this is very pro-growth, pro-market, and pro-consumer. And then if you were to get technical and very Asian and smart, you would say the definition of socialism is when a nation's government takes over the means of production. That would be the government says, hey, we now are going to take over Google. That is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the next form of capitalism. There's nothing stopping the majority of citizens in a democracy from voting ourselves a dividend.
Why are you the only candidate who's thinking through what to do about this? I think it's kind of weird.
I think it's weird.
You told me 3 months ago that we would have an extended conversation in any debate here on planet Earth about universal basic income, and that Andrew Yang would be driving it. Look, no one knew who this guy was at the start of the year.
What was it like for you at that first debate surrounded by lifelong politicians?
Well, I was joking that the debates got easier when I realized it wasn't really a debate.
What were you thinking? What was I thinking indeed? But I'm a fast learner. Yeah.
Preparing for the debates next week, and we have a surprise plan for the country that we think is going to blow people's minds.
He gave away cash.
My campaign will now give a freedom dividend of $1,000 a month for an entire year to 10 American families. If you believe that you can solve your own problems better than any politician, go to yang2020.com and tell us how $1,000 a month will help you do just that.
Like a radio station contest. It's $1,000 Thursday.
Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
It's original, I'll give you that.
That might be the most ridiculous proposal I've ever seen on this network, and I've watched every episode of The Bachelorette.
Well, I just, I admire and frankly take joy in hearing people with innovative ideas.
We got over 1 million in donations, most of it from new donors in the 72 hours after the debate.
Oh, wow.
And in the 72 hours that followed, they received 450,000 entries.
The American people are speaking.
He was asked to be introduced as the Asian bad boy of tech, but I'm just going to say Andrew Yang.
If you think my candidacy is going well, I'm literally giving free money to people and I'm still in 6th place.
Next.
Why haven't you hit none of the other Democratic candidates with the zingers yet?
No, we got to wait until the field shrinks. I'm Mr. Positive until then.
Ooh, so when it gets down to about 4 or 5.
Are you worried that because you're polling higher, that as other candidates get desperate, they'll start offering $1,100 a month?
Well, that would be a version of victory, Seth. I've said for a while that I'm either going to win or the other candidates are going to sound a lot like me.
Well, that's a very good way of looking at it.
We're in the middle of what other people call the fourth industrial revolution.
There's an experiment going on right now in the city of Stockton with what's called universal basic income.
I agree with my friend Andrew Yang. I think universal basic income is a good idea.
Are they trying to steal your thunder?
Well, to me, I'm thrilled when other candidates adopt my ideas. Well, Elizabeth Warren said she's halfway through my book, which I was like, awesome. So the Freedom Dividend is a foundation. That doesn't solve the problems. We need to build a house on top of the foundation. Right now, the myth is that we're a meritocracy. If you're smart and you work hard, regardless of your circumstances, you can make it. And then the numbers show that's generally incorrect. If you were born in the 1990s, you're down to a 50-50 shot of doing better than your parents. If you were born in the 1940s, that probability was 93%. We're the most unequal country by many measurements in the history of the world. Capitalism right now, it's become this winner-take-all economy, particularly in the US. You have this crony capitalism and really wealthy interests just pulling the strings. So we need to start using different measurements to try and drive our economy and society forward. We have to broaden our definition of what work is. My wife is at home with our 2 boys, one of whom is autistic, and what is her work every day included at in GDP? Zero.
We know that's nonsense. We know that's the opposite of the truth, that her work is the most important and challenging and vital work that's being done in our society today.
Your work also valued at 0 right now, running for president?
It probably is.
A record high GDP. You know what else are record highs in this country? Suicide. Depression, stress, suicides, drug overdoses. It has gotten so bad that our life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years.
Do you all know the last time our life expectancy declined for 3 years in a row? You have to go even before World War II, I think. You have to go even before the Depression, the Spanish flu of 1918.
A global pandemic that killed millions. We are back in Spanish flu territory because drug overdoses and suicides have overtaken vehicle deaths as cause of death in this country.
It is actually highly unusual for life expectancy to decline ever in a developed country. That is not normal. Ordinarily, life expectancy will just keep creeping up if you're a rich, advanced, developed country like ours. Going down 1 year,
is highly unusual. Going down 3 years in a row is a catastrophe. Right now, our country is beating us over the head with three big numbers. What are they? GDP, headline unemployment, stock market prices, right? So I'm just going to quickly trash each of them because they're pretty much garbage. GDP, even the inventor said 100 years ago, this is a terrible measurement of national well-being. We should not use it as that. Headline unemployment does not include people dropping out of the workforce. It doesn't include the fact that 40 to 44% of recent college graduates are underemployed in a job that does not require a degree. Does not include the fact that 94% of new jobs are temp, gig, or contract jobs that often don't have benefits. It doesn't talk about whether you need to do two jobs in order to just make ends meet. None of these things figure in the headline unemployment rate. Even Donald Trump, when he was a candidate, do you remember this? What did he say? He was like, oh, the headline unemployment number is fake news. Remember that? Remember that? And then he became president. All of a sudden, it's real news. The bottom 80% of Americans own 8% of stock market wealth. The bottom 50% own 0. Why would you have a measurement that corresponds to the top 20% of your population and treat it like it's 100%?
So you have to ask yourself, are the measurements wrong, or are we actually prioritizing this production number over the lifespan of our people? You can't make progress if you don't have a baseline.
You think that we need to judge economic health on happiness. Is that an accurate distillation of the way you think?
It's not quite happiness, but that's essentially right. As your president, I'm just going to go down the street to the Bureau of Economic Analysis and say, hey, GDP, 100 years old, kind of out of date. Let's modernize it.
What do we have to do to actually make it something you would care about?
You know, before we came up with GDP, the way we measured our economy was we would do things like count the kids in the poorhouse.
How about your mental health and freedom from substance abuse? How about your health and well-being and life expectancy? How about clean air and clean water? How about how our kids are doing?
I'm very behind the idea of how bad a viewing experience the State of the Union is. This is something you agree with. Yes?
I completely agree. It's gotten bizarrely unwatchable.
Yeah.
The State of the Union right now is this bizarre theater performance. How many of you checked out and stopped watching that? Yeah.
So my plan is to take the American scorecard with the real numbers of how we're doing and then present them to you, the American people, in a PowerPoint deck. Every year at the State of the Union, I'll be the first president to use PowerPoint. Hopefully that's a good thing.
Yes, the PowerPoint chant. Yeah, the PowerPoint chant is out. This is the nerdiest campaign in presidential history.
Well, it's about damn time the leader of the free world stood in front of Congress and said, my fellow Americans, does anyone have an HDMI cable?
I can't imagine PowerPoint's polling quite as well as $1,000 a month, but I like your moxie.
A slow and steady rise in the polls. You got a national poll. You came in at 8% today.
Presidential candidate Andrew Yang holds the 4th place spot among California voters. That means, by the way, that he is beating fellow contender Senator Kamala Harris in her home state.
Do you think you're being taken seriously enough?
It's all fun and games until Andrew Yang passes you in the polls.
We're about to close out Q3, and we've got some news for the world. Because they're looking up, they're saying, hey, Andrew Yang, his campaign, really interesting, raised $2.8 million in Q2. We're about to blow that figure out of the water. We raised $2 million in the last week alone.
Andrew Yang posted the largest percentage gain in fundraising amongst all Democrats to report so far.
When we put up that $10 million number, Virginia, there was a tremor in the political world. They said, what just happened?
Yes, Bernie's got the most money, but hey, wait, he's not there. Even though he raised $4 million more than Cory Booker, they decided to go with Cory Booker on that. You can also see on CNN, they did effectively the same thing. And this graphic, they fit in one more person, but not one more Yang.
But online, a lot of your people feel like there's a conspiracy to keep you invisible. I deleted one tweet with your name in it, and I got just killed. Like, why are you trying to erase it? So,
Let Yang speak.
Yeah.
You know, there was this one segment where they literally got my first name wrong. They called me John Yang. The graphic actually said John Yang.
John Yang living his best life.
And I had to say on that one, I was like, why do I feel like this would not have happened to most other candidates?
Tonight was the 5th Democratic debate.
We were waiting a little while to hear from you.
They didn't get to you till 32 minutes in.
Yeah, it was quite odd.
Run it! Run it! He's finally talking! Shut up! They let him talk! Finally! Look, he's talking! He's talking!
Just let me listen to
Oh shit, he's talking! This is so exciting!
Andrew Yang supporters are angry that their candidate didn't get to talk very much last night. Joe Biden supporters are angry that theirs did.
2 hours, you only got to speak for about 6.5 minutes.
MSNBC, hands up our democracy!
At first I was like, when the hell are they gonna fucking call on me? There was one point I literally just had both hands up. The hypocrisy of MSNBC, frankly, is just making us stronger and stronger.
We also want to welcome Andrew Yang, who I can already tell is mad he hasn't talked yet.
No, not at all. It's me, Andrew Yang. I want to say what up to my Yang gang. Hey, what do you say we get a Yang gang bang going, huh?
Seems like a small story, but it's not. It's actually a huge story because it goes to the mindset of the mainstream media.
Yeah. Big picture, the media's treatment of us, I think, has been colored by the fact that they just didn't know what to do with me. The fact that we've gone from nowhere to 6th in the poll, that's actually a harder leap to make than being in 6th place and then going from 6th to 1st.
You can see it really clearly. The numbers are just going up and up to the right. And I want to walk through a little bit of why the polls do not actually measure our true strength. Most people that get polled get called on a landline. What's a landline? This young person, exactly. You actually have to pick up that landline and have a conversation with a pollster. The YangGang and landlines don't really overlap that much.
This footage of Yang skateboarding, which is an effective way of showing how good Yang is at skateboarding, and even more effective at showing how sparsely attended his rally is.
Apparently we've set a record for the season in terms of number of people at a political event at this library. We had an event at a union hall, and they said that it was the biggest crowd they'd had of any candidate this cycle. We've had standing room only crowds in early state venues, and we've even had to turn people away. How many of us are here today? What's the official count? I'm going to give a Trumpian number. There are 5 million people here today.
It is this week in unnecessary censorship.
So, do you guys each other?
No.
That's great. Sir, we have to bring your daughter everywhere we go.
Hurricane Dorian comes up the East Coast. How do you handle that national emergency?
Well, I keep my Sharpies in my desk, for one thing. We all know who gets punished the worst when there's a natural disaster. It's poor people, it's people of color, it's people that don't have the resources to literally move to higher ground or get in a car and drive away. And so the Freedom Dividend will help a little bit, but we need to invest tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars in trying to make our communities more resilient for the ravages of climate change. I mean, you guys see what's going on out west with these wildfires? That's climate change. How many of you all are concerned about climate change? If you want to raise your hand on this. Yeah, everyone. If you don't hand up, you definitely should. Was there anyone? I see you. He's not that concerned about it. We'll work on him. I think there's a growing consensus around the urgency of climate change. It's the clearest existential threat to our way of life and our entire species. The first thing I would do is rejoin the Paris Accords. We need to let the world know that the U.S. is open for business when fighting climate change is concerned. We want to be the leader. The biggest externality facing us right now is carbon emissions. If I'm a company and I pollute, that doesn't cost me. That costs everyone. My campaign is built around updating our economic measurements, and one of the elements of my plan is for large companies to actually have to measure their emissions and then not just pay a carbon tax, but also take into account their impact on people aside from their shareholders. A carbon fee and dividend is a bipartisan idea. There are many Republicans that are behind it. It came this close to passing, even in this Congress, which is really saying something. Companies can be trusted to do the right thing for their bottom line. And if you have to invest some of those billions of dollars in some of the energy sources of the future, that's what you should be doing. You should have done that decades ago if you had your acts together. So, don't time your rhythm. It's 10 years too late to keep the Earth from warming. Greenland just came out with a study saying that their ice pack is melting at the rate projected in 2070 today. There's a proverb that says the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, the second best time is now. So we have to stop thinking that if we do less of the bad, it's going to work. We have to do more of the good. So we need to reforest, we need to reseed our oceans. And I know for a fact Elon wants to work on this.
Does that follow with a thing about how we're all going to drive electric cars?
Because they're awesome.
Will you lead by example and order an electric presidential vehicle?
Wow.
Yes, I will, and I'll go even better. The entire White House motor pool will be electric.
All right.
Would you eliminate some subsidies for fossil fuel or all subsidies?
I'd get rid of them all. I mean, why would you leave any of them on? And if we take that same level of energy and put it towards renewable forms of energy, updating our infrastructure, making progress on climate change, we can actually create tens, hundreds of thousands of new jobs. This is going to sound so politician-y, but I was just with this entrepreneur, Ned Reynolds, in New Hampshire, and he now has 260 solar installers working for him. Those are the kinds of jobs we need to be creating in very large numbers. We're spending $750 billion that we know of on our military-industrial complex every year. And I'm going to share a story that I heard secondhand, so I can't verify it. But there was a Top Gun, a fighter pilot, who said that his least favorite time of the year is at the end of the fiscal year because he flies over the Pacific Ocean and dumps oil into the ocean. Now, why is he doing that? Because they have to use all the oil that's budgeted, or else they won't get the same amount budgeted the following year. We have to take some of the $750 billion and start channeling it towards our infrastructure. To me, safe drinking water is a fundamental human right, and that if you're an American, you should not be stressed out about the water that you are drinking and your kids are drinking. And this is, again, the problem with having the almighty dollar running our society, where people look up and say, oh, replacing the pipes is expensive, or, oh, another substance would be more expensive. Are you kidding me? You know what's expensive? Poisoning our kids.
Yes. Proposed something that not a lot of people have heard of, which is this thing called thorium.
Thorium is a next generation fuel for a nuclear reactor. Thorium is superior to uranium as a fuel source on many levels. One is it's not intrinsically radioactive on its own, so that's great. Two, you can't make weapons out of it. If we get it right, it could be a tremendous boost in moving us towards more sustainable forms of energy and like reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. And I do not know why other candidates are shying away from nuclear. I mean, other countries have been using nuclear power successfully for a number of years to reduce their emissions. If we're in a crisis, which we are, then you have to consider every alternative on the table. First, you have to get your own house in order and try and move towards more sustainable forms of energy. Second, we need to make it more compelling for other countries to adopt wind and solar and renewable forms of energy as opposed to coal and fossil fuels. In our national politics, the pendulum tends to swing from one extreme to the other. So you have Donald Trump, and the rest of the world is like, what is going on with America? They like drop out of the Paris Accords, they're like entirely backwards. And then you end up with President Yang. The rest of the world will be like, wow, America got its act together very, very quickly. I'm going to take it a step further. I propose a constitutional amendment that makes it the responsibility of the United States government to safeguard and protect our environment for future generations. I just want to stick up for Tom. We have a broken campaign finance system, but Tom's been spending his own money fighting climate change. And you can't knock someone for having money and spending it in the right way, in my opinion. Thanks, Andrew. No problem.
Yang 2020. Everyone gets $1,000 and a compliment. I love it.
I'm Cliff. I'm a sophomore here at Georgetown.
I see you got dressed up, Cliff.
Yeah. Well, you're not wearing a tie, so.
Oh, snap.
I like Andrew Yang a little bit.
What do you like about Andrew Yang?
He wasn't wearing a tie.
Yeah.
Would you wear a tie for official business as president?
If I thought it was helpful to conduct official business, of course. I don't hate them as much as people make out.
So what else can I tell you that's like inside scoop inside baseball? The secret weapon of the campaign is about to be unveiled. Yeah! Secret weapon! And that secret weapon is my wife, Evelyn. And if you think I'm a badass, whoa, wait until you see Evelyn. America's gonna be like, we need to elect Andrew Yang just so we can have her as the first lady. Let's give a warm YangGang welcome to my wife, Evelyn Yang.
When you met, you have said that he had no game.
Yeah, she did say that.
I definitely married up, Fred. No, it didn't take you to point that out. Everyone was on that shit. I wonder you thought I was making Evelyn up for a while.
Why is it so important to you both to talk about your son?
It would never occur to me not to talk about our son. To me, being neurologically atypical is the new normal. And we need to start recognizing that in our society. I go to my wife and I say, hey, babe, I'm going to run for president. And her first question is, what are we going to do about healthcare? We have this messed up system in the US where when we get sick or injured, we're more stressed out about paying for it or navigating our crazy bureaucracy than actually getting well. And it's because we have a system that's designed not to maximize our health and well-being. It's a system designed to maximize revenue.
If you have a child with special needs, it's expensive. If you don't have access to good health care, families literally have nothing.
We need to move towards a Medicare for All system where every American has access to quality and affordable services and start supporting families in a real way.
Andrew Yang proposes setting prices for medical services and moving doctors to salaries rather than fees. He supports Medicare for all who want it, a public option.
As someone who has run a business, I know that our current healthcare system makes it harder to hire people, makes it harder to give them benefits and treat them as full-time employees. You instead pretend they're contractors. We have one of the only systems in the world where it's somehow tied to employment. It makes it harder to change jobs. It makes it harder to start a company. And so the question is, how do you separate healthcare from your employment situation? I am for a public option that's available to all Americans, but I would not do away with private insurance. There's a way to provide Medicare for all that does not prohibit private insurance. The goal has to be to demonstrate to the American people that this Medicare plan is superior to your current insurance without pulling the rug out from under you and saying that the insurance no longer exists. If you had come to me and said that I wasn't going to have to worry about my employees' health care anymore, I would have jumped for joy. Have you all noticed that your health care insurance costs always just go in one direction? Did you all know that the drug companies routinely charge us 2, 3, 4 times as much as they do citizens of other countries for the same drugs that we actually funded the development of? You all know that healthcare industry prices are completely insane and out of whack and arbitrary. And then Americans are making terrible choices where they have to choose between their medications and food and shelter or like clothing their kids or, it's just like terrible, terrible choices. One thing if we were all remarkably healthy as a result of all this expense, but we are not. We underperform by very basic measurements. And then when someone suggested, Medicare should actually try and negotiate lower prices on the American people, Congress blocked that rule because of lobbying from the drug companies. We have to break the stranglehold of the drug lobby and say, of course the American government can negotiate for lower prices. And I'm going to suggest to you all it's going to take a president like me who owes none of the drug companies or any of the lobbyists like a dime. Like, I don't care about any of that stuff. Drug companies have to charge us what they charge citizens of other countries. Sounds obvious. If you do not succeed, we, the government, have the right to forcibly appropriate the license to that drug. We will then manufacture your drug and you will lose hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue because you just couldn't resist sticking it to us. So what you have to do is you have to tie doing the right thing to the bottom line, then all of a sudden their behavior will change.
You also believe in free marriage counseling?
Yeah, the data shows that if you grow up in a two-parent household, certain outcomes are more likely. And so from a societal perspective, it makes perfect sense to try and keep couples together if they want to stay together.
You're in favor of a White House psychologist?
Yes. I would do away with those TV advertisements for drugs. There are only 2 countries that allow those advertisements, us and New Zealand. You need the drug, your doctor will tell you about the drug.
New tonight, legalizing pot. Andrew Yang referencing the iconic series Breaking Bad with the tweet you see there of him surrounded by drugs in a hazmat suit. He did it to highlight his support for legalizing marijuana.
We need to legalize weed as quickly as possible.
And I'm for full legalization, remove it from the federally controlled substance list. So my plan as president is on April 20th of 2021. I'm going to mass pardon everyone who's in jail for a nonviolent drug-related offense. I'm going to high-five them on the way out, and I'm going to be a very popular man that day. So in addition to decriminalizing marijuana, I would decriminalize opiates for personal use.
That's a big deal. I mean, does that include heroin?
Yes, it does. I was in Iowa, and a high school student, senior, told me that his classmates had fentanyl patches on their arms already. They were addicted, and what could we do? And I realized that those teenagers would never seek treatment because it's an illegal substance. And this really stuck with me. So I looked into it and said, okay, what have other countries done in this situation? And some of them have had massive successes with decriminalization of opiates for personal use. We take the drugs away, yes, but then we refer you to treatment and not a prison cell. And we have to recognize this is a disease of capitalism run amok. You had more opiate prescriptions in the state of Ohio than people in the state of Ohio at one point. And that was on the government's watch. And then we somehow hold individuals accountable for becoming addicted when you had companies that profited to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. That company made $30 billion. They got a 2% fine, and they killed tens of thousands of Americans 8 an hour.
Do you think they need to go to jail?
I do. And then we need to open up safe consumption and safe injection sites around the country because they save lives. And when other countries have tried this, they've seen reductions in both use and abuse and overdoses.
People are stopping you on the street. What are they usually asking you about?
Most of the time I get something like, YangGang, or like, hey, I support you, or like, keep going. Someone called me the Asian Oprah because we've been giving 1,000 bucks, saying like that.
Just like that, yeah.
Just like that. Some of you are here, you're Yang curious, you're like, ooh, this guy's interesting. Can he win? Oh, I can win. I have been inside the machine, and I can tell you, we can win this whole thing.
This could actually happen. What is the path?
It's happening. Yeah. People sense that I'm a different sort of campaign, and that's why the energy feels so human. What they say is, you don't sound like any other politician, and this is what we need. I got the highest compliment of my campaign from a black woman in Detroit. She said to me, Andrew, black people can smell bullshit a mile away. And you don't stink. One person said, you're actually what I hoped for when I voted for Donald Trump.
Wow. I voted for Trump in 2016, and honestly, I'll probably vote for him again if Yang doesn't make it through.
I'm one of those registered Republicans, went for Trump last time, truck driver, put me down as another one in that category.
Why would you be turning on him?
I don't think he's fit to be commander-in-chief. Last night during his bedtime prayers, he asked me for dirt on Joe Biden. No dice. Yeah, no way. This time I'm voting for Andrew Yang. I really need that $1,000. That's the sound of the Lord voting for the Yang Gang.
This isn't just me speculating. If you look at the numbers, we have the highest enthusiasm rate for any candidate in this race. When people decide they're going to vote for Andrew Yang, they're not going anywhere.
One of the supporters who tattooed your face
on his calf. Yeah, you can't see that coming. But there's also...
Have you done that? No, and I said, Andrew, I think he loves you more than I do because I would never tattoo your face on my body.
Immediately you think, is that real? Right. And then you meet the person who's a military veteran, and oh yeah, it's real.
What is this like to you, Los Angeles? This looks like a fucking revolution to me. And if you look at revolutions and successful campaigns throughout history, what did they start with? People. They started with people, they started with passion. We have something that other candidates spend millions, tens of millions of dollars to get, but they can't get it. Because you can't buy it. You can't buy humanity. You can't buy passion. You can't buy what brought you all here today. And when you do buy it, you can tell they bought it. Yes, you can. Yes. And everyone looks at it and be like, we know you bought that shit. Yeah.
Why are we losing to the fossil fuel companies? Yeah. Why are we losing to the gun lobby and the NRA? And the answer is this. We all know, everyone on the stage knows, that our government has been overrun by money and corporate interests. Our political system is held captive by rich corporations and mega wealthy individuals, and like the average voter feels like my vote doesn't matter. My proposal is that we give every American $100 democracy dollars that can only be contributed to a political campaign. This would wash out the lobbyist cash by a factor of 8 to 1. I'm also for lowering the voting age to 16, because if you're 16 years old, you can pay taxes, you should have a say in what goes on in our country. Then all of a sudden you'd activate all of high school juniors, every high school would become a political hotbed. And studies have shown that the younger you are when you first vote, the more likely you are to vote throughout your entire lifetime. When I've presented this, they've been like, well, 16-year-olds don't know what's going on with politics. I'm just like, well, a lot of Americans don't know what's going on with politics. Right. It's not like you're giving someone a freaking pop quiz when they show up to the polls, being like, have you studied that?
Yeah, right.
I mean, they're called low information voters for a reason.
How do you plan to improve America's failing education system?
So many things we can do. Teachers know they can only control 1/3 of the kids' educational outcomes. The other 2/3 are parental time, words read to the child, stress levels in the house. So number one, if you put resources into the household, you're actually getting the kids in a better position to learn and then helping the teachers be in a better position to teach. So we need to pay teachers more because the data clearly shows that a good teacher is worth his or her weight in gold. $12,000 a year raise would just be a start. We need to lighten up the emphasis on standardized tests, which do not measure anything fundamental about our character or human worth. That right now is making our teachers make these choices in the classroom where they know that it's not good for the kid, but they're like, well, I'm going to get evaluated on this test, and the kid's going to get evaluated on this test, so let's head to this direction. Get from someone who's really good at filling out bubble cards. Those tests do not measure anything except the ability to fill out bubble cards. You all know that we invented the SAT during World War II to identify which kids not to send to the front lines. That's the genesis of the SAT. And now we treat every year like it's wartime. Treating everything in high school like college preparation doesn't make sense. What would make more sense for them is teaching things that are broadly useful, like financial literacy and relationship skills. One proxy should be, if you can look it up on a smartphone, it should not necessarily be the main point of emphasis. You need to try and prepare kids for different kinds of paths instead of saying college, college, college. Technical, apprenticeship, vocational programs are very, very, very stable careers in many cases. There are many of those jobs that are going to stand the test of time. It's very hard to automate away a plumber or an HVAC repair person. Now, you said before Bernie's like free college for everyone. The problem with that solution is it pretends that college solves the employment problems of young people. If I say something like free college, only 33% of Americans are going to attend college. And if you already graduate from college because you're 24, 25, you look up and be like, oh, that stuff's free now? It doesn't really help you. But $1,000 a month helps everyone. And this is one reason why I'm so into the Freedom Dividend instead of something like free college. Because why would you subsidize something that only the top third of the population is going to use? The 6-year completion rate right now for college is only 59%. So 40%, 41% of the kids who are showing up aren't graduating in 6 years. And they also get the debt. How expensive is Georgetown nowadays? I heard 77. That's crazy.
How many of you owe student loan debt? I'm in the Bernie camp where we have to forgive a ton of that debt and free you all up.
The things I'm proposing is like a 10 by 10 where if you commit 10% of your wages for 10 years, then you're debt free. Young people should be starting families, buying homes, starting businesses, and not paying off this phantom student loan debt. The schools at this point have long since forgotten about these loans because they got paid off already. This is just these financial companies that are holding the loans.
That's important for people to understand.
Nothing's going to stimulate the economy better than getting student loans off the backs of freaking young people.
I owed $100,000 plus in student loan debt myself in the 2000s. I used to call it my mistress. And I was like paying off some phantom family in another town. I was like, I hope they're having a good time with my $900 a month. I hope they let me visit them sometime. That's probably somewhat inappropriate. Oh yeah, I was single at the time. You look up and you're like, okay, how did college get so freaking expensive? It got 2.5 times more expensive than when I went, and it has not gotten 2.5 times better.
If you want your students to have access to federal loans, you have to bring your administrator to student ratio in line with what it was like in the 1990s. The schools would scream bloody murder. They'd be like, I can't do that, that's impossible. And you'd be like, well, I have a feeling you're gonna figure it out.
Fortunately this week, another school shooting. Oh, it's awful.
My beautiful 4-year-old daughter, Dayla, was struck by a stray bullet March 2011.
I have a 6 and 3-year-old boy, I was imagining. I was imagining it was one of them that got shot and the other saw it. I'm so sorry.
That was Andrew Yang, overwhelmed with emotion while hearing one victim's personal story.
I was just with my kids and I hugged them a little extra tight. It's just a human response, and this sort of phenomenon cannot be allowed to be possible in this country. Students are doing active shooter drills in their schools. My boys are too young right now to understand what's going on in our country, and I want to see to it that hopefully by the time they arrive in school that we don't have a need for these drills anymore. I'm aligned with Democrats in terms of the big legislative goals. We need to have universal background checks and red flag laws and ban automatic weapons, but the reality is we have over 300 million firearms already in this country. About 1 for every man, woman, and child, and whatever law we pass, those firearms are still out there. We should follow the example of other countries and have essentially a perpetual gun buyback. I would also offer to upgrade everyone's guns to those signature guns where only you can fire them, turn everyone's gun into a James Bond gun.
Ooh, I like that.
And then we're safer because that gun goes to someone else and they can't fire it.
Yes.
A lot of gun owners would actually like that because it makes their gun more personalized. A lot of gun owners have children. They know their children get a hold of the gun and tragedies can occur. So if you were to make it cost-free, you would see hundreds of thousands of these guns become personalized and then much, much safer. And we also need to have licensing and an inventory system where if someone buys an arsenal, as the Las Vegas shooter does, you have to ask yourself, it's like, what is the legitimate purpose? When there's a shooting in this country, did you know the stocks of gun manufacturers actually go up? Because people buy more guns because they're afraid of regulation. This is called an externality, like this tragedy. So one of my proposals is to fine gun manufacturers when their guns are used in a mass shooting. And then the incentives would be reversed very quickly, because if my firearm, my product gets used in a mass shooting, then all of a sudden I get hit with a $10 million fine the next day. Then do you think I might be more open to some legislation that helps bring the casualty rate down? They're going to do what they think is in their financial best interest. We have to make it in their financial best interest to make us safer. And then we need to treat gun violence like a public health crisis and study it accordingly. I'm for trying to provide like more positive alternatives that move our society in the right way without pretending, frankly, that we can just regulate the heck out of everything.
I just want to give a shout out to that sign that says year-round daylight savings. When we switch back and forth by even that hour, it actually kills Americans because you're actually a little screwed up, you drive worse, and then there's like a spike in accidents that day. How many of you knew that? Yeah.
There are now 15 Democrats running in the primary. That's so many people. Look at all those faces.
Michael Bloomberg and his $50 billion filing paperwork to enter the presidential race. What do you think of that?
It's probably going to change the price of advertising.
Do you pledge to support the Democratic nominee?
Yes, I would never do anything that would increase the chance of Donald Trump becoming president. The goal is to beat that man.
So you're ruling out entirely an independent run or a third-party run?
Yes, I'm ruling them out. It seems that the most effective way to make these solutions happen will be for me to win, and that is the plan.
And people can tell that I'm not a career politician. I just want to get in there, solve the problems for us, seal it up after I leave, and then walk on out of there. We're activating people on every point of the political spectrum, from disaffected people who voted for Donald Trump, and independents, libertarians, as well as Democrats and progressives.
Andrew Yang actually tweets me all the time.
He does?
A presidential candidate is tweeting me, so I hope he wins.
Okay, so you would vote for him?
I'd go for, Andrew. I vote for Andrew Yang.
Okay, really quick before I let you go.
I guess I'm part of the Yang Gang.
You're in the Yang Gang.
I am sticking with Yang. I believe I'm YangGang.
I think Andrew Yang is always strong. I'm not gonna lie. I think his numbers are solid. He has interesting ideas.
Like $1,000 a month is a solid number?
No, his numbers are solid. Like he knows what he's talking about.
I think she likes Yang. When
I love him.
He looks like what I think leaders will start looking like. Because he's got that kind of tech thing, like I want to buy something from him.
Right. David Arquette, I think he's cool, but he's probably a D-lister. Like, did you get above the D-list?
Wow, he's hating on David Arquette.
I know. David Arquette's the man. Rivers Cuomo of Weezer is doing a concert for us in Iowa. Nick Cage is a donor and supporter. Elon Musk supported me.
The Tesla CEO tweeted his support for the venture capitalist on Saturday. He would be our first openly goth president. I think this is very important.
There are people that are really enthusiastic about him, and he's been putting on, they're having a lot of fun up there. And his supporters seem to be having fun with them.
The more fun we've had, the better we've done.
Other campaigns are plateauing or contracting while we are growing quickly.
One of the most hyped presidential candidates is ending his White House bid, and another who was completely unknown a year ago is hitting his stride.
You're seeing voters come out for us in record numbers. We're having a giant rock concert in Iowa.
I am bringing a caravan of, I think, about 5 cars from Oklahoma to Yangapalooza.
Yangapalooza! I think I'm gonna go up there before the song's over, just to rock out a little bit.
He called this Iowa gathering Yangapalooza. And the rain-soaked crowd knows his core message as well as their favorite songs.
Rallies and gatherings right now, you'd be glad you're here, that's for damn sure. So your being here today is historic because we're going to come together and we're going to march across a bridge and we're going to show up at the Wells Fargo Arena. They're going to see each and every one of you. They're going to see you. They're going to look up and they're going to say, wow, Yang has a lot of people. Yeah. I pledge to you all that after I become president, we're going to have Yangapalooza, the sequel, in epic fashion on the White House fucking lawn. Let's do it!
Now, I want you all to ask yourselves for a moment, how is a man you'd never heard of 8 months ago speaking after Joe Biden and before Elizabeth Warren?
I tell you how much it meant to me being up on that stage and hearing you all raining down cheers. And you could tell people in that crowd were like, whoa. That energy, like you could tell that it got a lot of wheels turning. Yep. A journalist who was there said, I cannot say this on the record, but you gave the best speech of the night. We campaigned in Iowa the next day and the crowds are bigger. The energy's higher, and at every stop, people were like, I saw you on Friday night, and I had to come find you.
The early mainstream needs the water to get a little warmer. They're saying, you know, that young guy's saying interesting stuff. They're saying that to their friends to see what the reaction is. That's right. And then when the reaction is positive, they'll be like, ooh, the water feels nice. And then one day they will look up and they'll say, you know what, I think I'm YangGang. And our friends are going to be like, heck yeah, I'm YangGang too.
What a talent that applies to being president.
I've got an above average memory. It would actually help me be a good commander-in-chief too, because I have a fairly good recall.
Mr. Yang, if you win the 2020 election, what would you say in your first call with Russian President Vladimir Putin?
It's a fun moment. Well, first I'd say, I'm sorry I beat your guy. Our foreign policy reflects what's happening at home. We were disintegrating. Our communities are falling apart. It got so bad that tens of millions of our fellow Americans decided to go for Trump. And now we have this erratic and unreliable foreign policy that's making our allies throw their hands up. The true threats of the 21st century include cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, things that, frankly, we're going to need the government to play catch-up in technology and innovation, and that's what I bring to the table as Commander-in-Chief. I think Russia is our greatest geopolitical threat because they've been hacking our democracy successfully, and they've been laughing their asses off about it for the last couple of years. I want to end endless wars, but I also want to let the world know that America's commitment is ironclad. We're going to live up to our international commitments. We're going to recommit to our partnerships and alliances, including NATO. And it was James Mattis that said that the more you invest in diplomats and diplomacy, the less you have to spend on ammunition. So the goal should be to spend more on diplomats. We have to rebuild here at home and then project a more reliable and sustained foreign policy. But I'm sure that our historic allies abroad are waiting with bated breath for a reasonable partner to get back into the White House and be able to live up to America's commitments.
Who would be our allies at this point? I mean,
yeah, exactly, unfortunately.
Immigration.
I'm the son of immigrants myself. I believe that immigrants make our country stronger and more dynamic. So we have to create a path forward. My father grew up on a peanut farm in Asia with no floor, and now his son is running for president. That is the immigration story that we have to be able to share with the American people. If you look at our history, almost half of Fortune 500 companies were founded by their immigrants or children of immigrants, and rates of business formation are much higher in immigrant communities.
So because this is the math campaign, I'm going to break down some fun numbers for you all. I'm here with you tonight, one of only 2 candidates in the field that 10% or more of Donald Trump voters say they will support, which means that when I am the nominee, we win the whole thing.
Who was the other one?
We will win. You probably know, Crystal. Take a guess.
Bernie Sanders?
Bernie Sanders.
And what is the #1 criteria that Democratic primary voters have for the nominee? Beating Donald Trump, that's right. They're looking around the field and they're saying, who can beat Donald Trump? Who can beat Donald Trump? Andrew Yang can beat Donald Trump! Yeah, there are a couple of chants going on. I think Yang beats Trump took over. It's like a game of rock, paper, scissors. And if Donald Trump's the scissors, I'm the fucking rock. Donald Trump knows this. Donald Trump months ago said this. He cannot wait to run against everyone in the Democratic field. His one fear is that some new figure comes out of nowhere to run against him. And that figure is me, YangGang, because he knows his attacks work on politicians, and his fear was that a new non-politician that is not full of shit comes out of nowhere. There is only one candidate in the field that he has not touched on Twitter, and you're looking at him.
Donald Trump hasn't messed with me online because he knows I'm actually better at the internet than he is. We've been hypothesizing as to what his nickname for me would be, and we came up with Comrade Yang because it's a little racist, it's a little communist. Right now, how do we all interact with cybersecurity?
I am just like you. When you see that long, weird legal agreement with I agree or I consent at the bottom, we all just scroll through that thing and hit the button. I have a law degree and I'm not reading that shit.
And then periodically there's some press release saying, hey, Yahoo's passwords were hacked. And then you're like, do I have to change my password?
I actually want to ask you this, the first time I've asked any group this. What percentage of the time do you actually change your password when they tell you to? Raise your hand if it's like 30% or less. I don't mean. I'm probably between the two of you, honestly. I should admit that, because I'm like the tech presidential candidate, so it'd be like, he definitely changes his password 100% of the time. Now I'm a human being. I'm like, this account doesn't matter. How many of you saw the study that just came out that said that our data is worth more than oil? Raise your hand to that. Now keep your hand up if you remember getting your data check in the mail. Did our checks get lost? They did not get lost. They went to the Amazon headquarters, the Google headquarters, the Facebook headquarters. Oh, they're getting our data checks to the tune of billions of dollars.
What I've come forward with is a plan that says our data is ours. And so I have a Bill of Rights for all American consumers. Number one, our data is ours no matter what what you're doing with it. Number two, if you get paid, you got to share it with us. Number three, anytime you sell, resell, repackage, you got to have an audit and tells us exactly what you're doing. And number four, we have to be able to turn this off or change preferences anytime we want. And there are techies who back me on this because they know that this path we're on is dangerous.
Senator Warren is calling for companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Google to be broken up. Is she right? Does that need to happen?
As usual, Senator Warren is 100% right in diagnosing the problem. There are absolutely excesses in technology, and in some cases, having them divest parts of their business is the right move. But we also have to be realistic that competition doesn't solve all of the problems. It's not like any of us wants to use the fourth best navigation app. There's a reason why no one is using Bing today. Sorry, Microsoft, it's true. Studies clearly show that we're seeing record levels of anxiety and depression coincident with smartphone adoption and social media use. Breaking up the tech companies does nothing to make our kids healthier. What we have to do is we have to home in on the specific problems we're trying to solve and use 21st century solutions for 21st century problems. Using a 20th century antitrust framework will not work. We are 24 years behind on technology. And I can say that with authority because we got rid of the Office of Technology Assessment in 1995. I guess they decided that everything had been invented by 1995.
Do you value women?
Of course I value women, and the way I would stand up for women is by making sure that reproductive rights are protected. And I'm on the record saying that I don't think a male legislator should have any say on women's reproductive rights or freedoms. We should leave the room. I do think that if guys got pregnant, we'd have very different conversations about this.
There are only two countries in the world that don't have paid family leave for new moms: the United States of America and Papua New Guinea. That is the entire list, and we need to get off this list as soon as possible.
Would you push for explicit protections for LGBT Americans?
Yes, I would. They're more likely to be kicked out of the house, fired from a job, economically persecuted. And one of the things they said to me was that my flagship proposal, this Freedom Dividend, would help make members of the community more resilient. But the laws need to catch up in a huge way.
Do you support the Equality Act?
Oh, 100% yes. I grew up the lone Asian kid in my neighborhood. So I was called chink and gook and other things. Someone just yelled a racial epithet at me out of a car just the other day. As a result, I've always wanted to try and look out for the little guy or little gal. I'm Asian, so you know I like to work.
Yeah.
But
they're
right
wooing you, and you did it on yourself. That's very politically correct.
I think Americans are smart enough and savvy enough to know a joke when they hear it. I think if anything, by bringing these stereotypes into the light and poking fun at them, you're actually dispelling them and making them weaker.
But this thing that happened with this guy from SNL who got hired and then fired over his racial slurs.
I first find out about it and I'm personally included in some of his offensive remarks.
Yeah, he attacked you specifically.
First thing I did was I thought, who the heck is this guy? And then I sat down with my wife and actually watched some of Shane's comedy. I concluded that I did not think he was an evil person. I thought, well, if I think that he should not lose his job, then I should certainly say something about that. I think in this country we become excessively punitive and vindictive around statements that people find offensive. I think that cancel culture has really become sort of the source of fear for many Americans, where we live in a culture that you're somehow afraid that if you say the wrong thing that your life could be changed forever. 2 months later, we move on, but that person still doesn't have a job, or that person's life has still been changed irrevocably. Instead of being unduly punitive and vindictive, we should be a little bit more forgiving and understanding and try and humanize behaviors that in the abstract we'd find problematic.
Sometimes people want a president who will react, though. Get punched in the face, they might punch back.
Oh, if you punch me in the face, I'll punch back. That's for sure.
I'm not going to test that.
It's Andrew Yang here, and I am about to go on stage or a rap concert. They don't know I'm here.
On that, you got a lot of fans over there. I see in Ohio. You've already clearly qualified for the next Democratic presidential debate.
The debates are a tremendous opportunity. I certainly wish CNN was moderating every debate.
And here's the math. You've spoken after 4 debates for less than 30 minutes.
Sounds about right. If you don't feel like you got your question answered tonight, it's understandable. There are 12 of us. I'm going to be answering voter questions for 10 straight hours this Friday.
I feel like you're gaining some traction.
Oh, definitely, Wolf. We've had over 10,000 Americans already submit questions for my AMA on Friday, and we raised almost 500,000 in the hours after the debate.
Hi, Leah. This is Andrew Yang. I'm calling from our live stream.
Oh my God. Are you kidding me?
Today, something creative and grassrootsy, a 10-hour online Q&A, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Quora, you name it.
I like to think voters have actually gotten their questions answered more thoroughly in this context than by turning on a debate, because the fact is in the debate stage, we end up with competing sound bites. Over 400,000 people have seen some aspect of this. We did 10 hours, the 10-hour marathon. So, and this is extra credit. It's hour 11. We're gonna do lightning round?
Quick lightning round.
My favorite chocolate is dark chocolate. I want to get rid of private prisons. I'm a fan of the 4-day work week. Campaign team, this does not apply to you. I'm kidding.
You get elected, will you tell us if aliens are real?
I will, unless it's just so scary.
Like public panic.
You are in favor of empowering MMA fighters.
Yes.
Favorite book?
Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami.
Favorite color is blue? Red or white wine?
Red.
You're in favor of abolishing the penny.
Yeah, so we spend more than a penny on each penny.
You realize you just lost Illinois.
We can find another thing for Abe.
You think that malls should stay open and should be supported by federal dollars?
Oh, I don't think that malls, as they currently exist, should be should stay in existence. But what we need to do is we need to provide some kind of transition to different uses. And if you don't repurpose them, then they become these sources of blight, where if you've ever been in a ghost mall, they are eerie.
What's your hottest pop culture take?
Be nice to the Game of Thrones people. They did their best.
Favorite TV show?
Right now, it's This Is Us. I watch it with my wife. I met Mandy Moore at an event.
Last thing that you binge watched?
The last season of Stranger Things.
Movies. Shawshank Redemption.
Favorite Disney movie?
Aladdin, the animated version, not this weird revamp.
I'm with you there. What is your favorite sport to play?
You know this, it's basketball for sure.
Right. Favorite athlete?
Michael Jordan's still the GOAT.
Favorite sports team?
Brooklyn Nets.
No, my teams are terrible.
Jets.
It's Jets, Mets, Nets, I suppose you'd have to say now. I was a longtime Knicks fan for my entire life until they dumped Jeremy Lin, honestly. And then I was like, fuck this shit.
You could have one celebrity endorsement today.
Oprah or The Rock?
WWE pro wrestler.
Randy Macho Man Savage.
You also came out against circumcision. Okay, what if somebody's, and again, asking for a friend, what if somebody's already had one? Can they have an extra $1,000 just to compensate?
Would you play Dungeons & Dragons in the White House?
I would for special occasions if there were kids around, because who doesn't love Dungeons & Dragons? I do support statehood for Washington, D.C. It's long overdue.
Do you actually run your Twitter?
It's me with a little plus sign next to it.
Favorite female artist?
Florence and the Machine.
Are you actually into the dead Kennedys, or was it just a costume?
I'm an admirer of the dead Kennedys, but I wasn't really that into them. They're a little bit before my time.
Okay.
I mean, the stuff like right after them, like, I like the Pixies, yes.
But when you're driving around,
I'm a big 80s fan, so I like the Smiths and the Cure. Boy George just tweeted something nice about me. I was a big Culture Club guy.
Favorite song?
How Soon Is Now by the Smiths.
Yesterday, Yang unveiled a Spotify playlist of his favorite jams, including such hits as Don't You Forget About Me. I'm sorry, that's actually his campaign slogan.
When Doves Cry by Prince, because it's awesome. I still miss you, Prince. How can you just leave me standing, alone in a world that's so cold?
Best rapper of all time?
Jay-Z. You know, I think Kanye West has lost his way, honestly, and his music's not as good either. And maybe that's the biggest problem. Sorry, Kanye, gotta tell like it is, man. I believe I'll be able to ride my bike indefinitely, because it's very hard to intercept a bicyclist. And by the time someone recognizes me, which does happen on occasion, I'm already past them. I'll be biking forever, Ian. I shouldn't be able to give speeches for money after I'm president, because it's human nature for me to go easy on someone who can pay me a lot of money for a speech after I'm out of office.
And Yang has a solution for this, and it's not stupid. Increase the pay of our top officials by a lot. Here's the catch. Presidents would be banned from joining corporate boards or giving speeches for money. Regulators will be banned from cashing in on the private side of the fields they regulated. Their only incentive will be promoting the good of the country, not enriching themselves afterward.
So I would make tax day into a national holiday. I would call it Revenue Day.
You should have your taxes filled out for you by AI. They could get 80% of Americans' taxes more or less right.
And then you'd get a video showing where your money's going, government employees thanking you. And then you can choose where to send the last 1% of your money, being like, you know what, I really want to fund these programs. And then there'd be someone from that program being like, well, thank you for choosing this program. Then you'd get Oprah and Tom Hanks and The Rock in on this video.
It's real,
instead of treating tax day like this thankless chore that we all dread. Like, oh, it's
you ever soak them in water?
The kind bars?
Yes. No, they're nuts.
No, I haven't done it. Does that improve them?
Soak your nuts in water. It really matters.
Oh, he's a doctor.
You imagine a scenario where the Asian man who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month becomes president of the United States in 2021. It'll be like, all right, guys, it's dividend time. Democrats will be like, yeah, I like money for families. That's great. And here's the great thing, Joe, is that then Republicans are going to look at it and be like, wait a minute. This is a net transfer for rural areas, for red states on the interior. Am I really going to stand in the way of my constituents getting this dividend? And you can imagine me being like, hey, what state wants to pilot this first? Freaking every state.
I don't need 80% of Congress. I just need 51%. You'll see the dividend will bring the country together because everyone is excited about it. And I think if someone like Mitch McConnell's like, hey, I'm going to stand in the way, I would call his bluff. The folks in Kentucky will be like, wait a minute. Like, someone's getting a dividend and like Mitch is standing in the way. Like, I'd be like, hey, Mitch, if you want to go to war with me on this, I'm happy to go to your people in Kentucky and be like, Mitch McConnell standing between you and a dividend. After I win, my first visit is going to be to the district that voted for me the least, and show up and say, look, I get it. You didn't vote for me, most of you, but I'm your president too, and I just want to solve the problems. And Republicans actually see me as someone they could work with because I'm non-ideological. I'll have a bipartisan team. I'm not someone who's just going to appoint Democrats up and down, and we can get things done.
It has been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you. I'm coming down.
Andrew Yang, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Andrew.
I'll come back.
Andrew Yang, I like you, sir.
Oh, thank you, man. I like you too.
I like you.
Thank you guys so much for taking my call.
Thank you, Ian.
You called me, so.
We did call you.
Certainly the most interesting person running for president.
I'm not running for president because I fantasized about being president. I'm running for president because, like many of you here in this room tonight, I'm a parent and a patriot, and I have seen the future that we're leaving for our kids, and it is not something I'm willing to accept.
So Andrew Yang, if you want more media attention, you gotta take it, man. The next time you get up on that stage, make your 6 minutes count. Just come out on stage and be like, elect me and I'll make it rain every motherfucking month. Universal basic income for all you universal basic bitches. This shit's gonna work and you can trust my ass because I rolled with Barack motherfucking Obama.
Andrew Yang knows America is being invaded by robots. They're sneaking across the border, taking the jobs we love. Andrew Yang will stop the robots from banging your wife and becoming your son's new dad. Yang 2020.
What do you think?
Andrew Yang 2020, get high, go to the mall, keep your foreskin, I'll give you money. That is how he might win.
Yang 2020. The robots. Them to hell.
I'm Andrew Yang, and I approve this message.
Andrew Yang, parent, patriot, not a politician. A new leader who understands that what's coming is the greatest economic transformation in history and who can lead us in the fight for the future that we want. For President Andrew Yang, a new way forward.
I'm Andrew Yang, and I approve this message. Peace.
Peace.
Boom!